The first day is the easiest for her to dismiss. The quiet that descends is not unfamiliar. It's happened before, a temporary atmospheric shift preceding the eventual storm. She tells herself you are just sulking, nursing a wounded ego that will soon enough crave resolution. This is a familiar script, and she knows her lines well. She expects the tension to build. For you to simmer in a silence that is heavy with unspoken accusations, a silence that is, in its own way, a form of engagement. She waits for the telltale signs, the clipped responses that beg for a follow-up question, the heavy sighs that demand attention, the brooding posture that screams for appeasement. These are all forms of currency in the economy of your past conflicts. She is ready to trade. But by the third day, the texture of the silence changes. It is no longer heavy. It becomes light, almost ambient. It doesn't feel like a pressure cooker about to explode, but like a vast, open sky. You move through the shared space with a calm efficiency that is unnerving. Your replies to practical questions are prompt and polite, devoid of subtext. You eat, you work, you exist alongside her, but the emotional tether has gone slack. She tests the waters with a carefully crafted sigh, a pointed look away, a withdrawal of her usual morning warmth. In the past, these subtle cues were like pulling the strings of a marionette, eliciting a predictable dance of concern, defense, or anxious pursuit. Now, they are met with nothing.
Oh.
The strings have been cut. The puppet is no longer connected. A week in, a quiet panic begins to hum beneath her composure. This is not the dramatic panic of a crisis, but the low-grade, persistent kind that lives in the background of everything. It's the feeling of stepping onto a stair that isn't there. The mechanisms she has spent years refining are failing. She sends a text, something designed to provoke a reaction, a vague allusion to a rough day. A passive-aggressive comment she knows would have once ignited a flurry of questions. The phone lights up with a notification, but it's not you. Your response, when it comes hours later, is a simple, "Hope you're okay." It is kind. It is mature. It is utterly devastating in its emotional neutrality, she realizes. With a dawning sense of disorientation that your lack of reaction has removed. The mirror in which she was accustomed to seeing her own reflection. For so long, your emotional responses, your jealousy, your hurt, your desperate need for reassurance, were the proof of her influence. Your pain was the measure of her power. Your anxiety was the confirmation of her significance in your life. Now there is no reflection. She cannot see herself in your eyes because they no longer hold a story about her. They are just calm. She is talking, but there is no echo. She is performing, but the audience has quietly left the theater. This new silence of yours is not the cold, punishing silence of a grudge. It is something far more terrifying. It is detached. It is the steady, unbothered silence of a man who is simply elsewhere. His energy, once so tightly wound around her every mood and whim, has retracted. It is no longer available for her to feed on. The attention that once fueled her sense of self is gone, and she is left with a hollow feeling, a kind of emotional starvation. She begins to feel insignificant, a satellite that has lost its gravitational pull, drifting into the cold emptiness of space. She starts to replay recent conversations, searching for the exact moment the shift occurred. Was it something she said? Something she did? But the uncertainty is the worst part. If you were angry, she could fight it. If you were hurt, she could comfort you, and in doing so, re-establish her role. But this calm detachment offers no handhold. There is no conflict to resolve, no wound to bandage. There is only a quiet, impenetrable wall of peace. And for the first time, a chilling thought whispers at the edge of her mind. This isn't a tactic. This isn't a game. This is what it looks like when a man begins to disappear while still standing in the same room. The storm inside him hasn't passed. It has been replaced by a profound and likely permanent stillness. The initial confusion begins to curdle into a more strategic and ultimately more desperate form of engagement. Her ego, a fragile yet dominant force, cannot accept the simple explanation that you have simply moved on. It must frame your calm as a calculated insult, a new and more sophisticated form of warfare. She tells herself, and perhaps anyone who will listen, that you are arrogant, that this silence is not peace, but a weaponized dismissal designed to make her feel small. This narrative is a shield, a way to transform her growing discomfort into a righteous anger she can more easily wield. If you are the villain, then she is the wounded party, and the familiar dynamics of conflict can resume. She waits for the inevitable crack in this facade, for the pride she believes must be simmering beneath the surface to finally boil over. But the crack never comes. Your calm doesn't break. It holds with a consistency that feels inhuman to her. This is when the true collapse begins. The absence of conflict ceases to feel like a temporary stalemate and starts to feel like a permanent exile. In the loud, chaotic theater of your past relationship, she always had a starring role, the provocateur, the comforter, the judge. Now, the stage is empty, the lights are off, and she is standing alone in the silence. There is no role for her to play in your piece. A profound powerlessness sets in, not the fleeting kind from a lost argument, but a deep, structural kind that undermines her entire sense of agency. The most painful realization begins to dawn. Your indifference is not a phase. It is an evolution. You are not withholding your reactions out of spite. You have simply transcended the need to have them. The machinery of your emotional response, she once knew how to operate with a mere sigh or a turned back, has been dismantled. The wiring has been rerouted. This is not a man who is angry. This is a man who is healed. And for someone whose identity was built on managing, provoking, and soothing your emotional state, your healing feels like her obsolescence. What cuts deeper than any shouted insult or tearful accusation is the quiet, a pervasive sense of replacement. It is not that you have found another person, but that you have found something far more compelling, a profound and self-sustaining peace. She witnesses this replacement in 1,000 small, brutal moments. She attempts to reignite an old argument, her voice rising with practiced drama, only to be met with your even tone and a simple, "I understand why you'd feel that way." The words are reasonable, but their emotional neutrality is a void. She sees you smile, a genuine, unburdened smile at something unrelated to her, and it feels like a betrayal. That smile is evidence that your happiness, your stability, your emotional equilibrium are no longer tied to her presence or her moods. You have reclaimed your emotional center of gravity, and in doing so, you have made her gravitational pull feel weak, almost negligible. This is the core of the devastation. It is a bruise to the ego far more profound than the heartbreak of a clean rejection. Rejection, at least, is a form of engagement. It is a passionate, if negative, acknowledgement of her significance. Your calm, however, is a quiet demotion. It communicates that she has been moved from the center of your emotional universe to the periphery, a spectator to a piece she cannot touch and did not create. The tools of her trade, the subtle tests, the manufactured drama, the conditional warmth are now useless. She is a locksmith confronted with a door that has vanished, leaving only an open archway. There is nothing to pick, nothing to force. You are simply and irrevocably open and free, and her attempts to lock you down again only highlight her own confinement. The control she thought was her right has evaporated, not because you wrested it from her, but because you stopped acknowledging it existed at all. The strategic panic of the previous phase gradually cools into a cold, obsessive fixation. Your silence is no longer just a problem to be solved. It has become a riddle she cannot decipher, a text she must endlessly analyze. She finds herself scrolling through old conversations, not with nostalgia, but with the frantic energy of a detective at a cold case. She dissects your past messages, the ones where you poured your heart out, where your anxiety was a palpable digital thing. She compares them to your current, composed replies, the polite, "Okay," the unprovocative, "I understand," the terminal, "Take care." The contrast is not just in word count, but in emotional weight. The old you was an open book, written in a language of raw feeling she was fluent in. The new you is a closed volume, written in a cipher she cannot break. This comparison leads her to a haunting, an unavoidable conclusion. This control was always within you. This composure was not a skill you learned overnight. It was a capacity you always possessed. You simply chose, for a time, to lay down your arms with her. You voluntarily entered the chaotic arena of her emotions, unguarded, believing the vulnerability was worth the connection. This realization is a devastating pivot in the narrative she has constructed. It flips the entire dynamic. She was not dominating a weak man. She was being trusted by a strong one. And she mistook that sacred vulnerability for a permanent character flaw. Now, seeing you fortified, she understands that the gates have been closed not just to her, but to the version of yourself that ever needed her approval. This is the true meaning of your liberation. She is its unwilling witness. Her testing shifts in quality. It is no longer the broad, dramatic gestures meant to provoke a storm. It becomes more precise, more insidious. Delayed reply to a mundane question to seed doubt, a sudden coldness in tone to see if you'll seek warmth. A strategic disappearance from a shared digital space to trigger the old anxiety of abandonment. In the past, these small, sharp games would have hooked you instantly, sending you into spirals of confusion and overthinking. You would have double-texted, sought clarification, demanded to know what was wrong. But now, you do not flinch. You do not chase. You simply accept the delayed reply, acknowledge the cold tone without mirroring it, and continue your life undisturbed by her absence. Your stillness in the face of her summoned storms is what nerves her most profoundly. It signals a level of awareness that makes her feel transparent. You are no longer a participant in the game. You are an observer who has understood the rules, the mechanics, and the desired outcome. And by refusing to play, you collapse the entire structure. She is left pulling the strings of a puppet that has not only been cut loose, but has walked away. She can no longer feed on the nourishment of your confusion or inflate her ego with the proof of your pursuit. The energy source she relied on has been shut off at the mains, and she is left in a chilling, quiet, powerless, invisible, and facing the terrifying truth that her influence was never inherent. It was merely a loan of your attention that you have now called in. As weeks stretch into months, the silence ceases to be a mere event and becomes an environment, an atmosphere she is forced to breathe. Your calm solidifies from a temporary state into a legendary quality in the landscape of her memory. It is no longer something you are doing, it is something you are. This distinction becomes the source of her deepest torment. For she slowly, painfully, comes to understand that your silence is not a tactic, while hers is. You are not holding your breath, waiting for her to break. You have simply learned to breathe a different, cleaner air. Her silence, in stark contrast, is a performance. It is a mask she wears, a strategic mirroring designed to lure you back into the old game to prove she can outlast you. But she is playing chess against a man who has left the board. This realization brings with it a profound sense of isolation. She is competing with a ghost, the ghost of your former reactivity, and she is losing badly. While she is pretending not to care, you are genuinely moving on. The evidence is no longer in your words to her, but in the quiet expansion of your life without her. She sees glimpses of it, a new hobby hinted at online, a photo with friends where your smile is easy and unrehearsed, a professional achievement you note without a trace of needing her validation. Each piece of evidence is a small, quiet hammer blow to the narrative she clings to. You are not decaying in her absence. You are flourishing. This forces a comparison she is desperate to avoid. Every new connection she attempts feels dull, transactional, and painfully predictable. The men she meets are either too eager, their quick reactions, and over-explaining, feeling weak and transparent, or they are coldly indifferent, a hollow mimicry of your calm that lacks its foundation of genuine peace. None carry the energy you now possess, that rare fusion of intensity and composure. You were passionate in your engagement, but disciplined in your detachment. This balance, which she once mistook for passivity, now feels magnetic in its absence. In every other man makes her crave it with a dull, persistent ache. You have, without any intention to become the standard, You ruined her tolerance for ordinary games. The silence you left behind now does the work that your words never could. It becomes a relentless, unforgiving mirror. In the past, she could twist your words, reinterpret your tone, and weaponize your emotional reactions to cast herself as the victim or the hero. But silence offers no raw material. It is pure, it is absolute. It reflects everything back at her with brutal clarity. When she looks into it, she does not see a villain in you. She sees the unflattering reflection of herself, impulsive, careless, and ultimately ungrateful for a love that was offered without guard. Your peace forces her to sit with the one confrontation. She has spent her entire life avoiding the confrontation with her own emptiness, with the noise she creates to avoid hearing the silence within herself. This is the beginning of her reluctant, painful growth. It is not born from a desire to be better, but from sheer necessity. The absence of your emotional feedback, the withdrawal of that constant stream of attention, forces her to find validation from within. For the first time, she has to face her own insecurity without the comfort of your reassurance. She must become the source of her own stability or shatter. This process is agonizing. It involves staring into the hollow spaces she used to fill with drama and control, and acknowledging the fear that lived there all along. She begins, haltingly, and without grace, to recognize that she mistook attention for affection and reaction for relevance. And though she will never say it to your face in her most honest moments, she silently thanks you. For your silence, in its quiet, brutal way, became the boundary she could never set for herself. It didn't destroy her. It taught her the painful, essential price of accountability. The silence, once a tool for survival, has now undergone a final, profound metamorphosis. It is no longer a response to her. It has been integrated into the very core of your being, becoming the foundational principle of your existence. What began as a defensive wall has been dismantled and rebuilt as a quiet, unshakable temple within you. You no longer practice silence. You inhabit it. This shift is evident in everything, from the way you handle a professional setback to the way you listen to a friend in distress. You no longer feel the urgent, compulsive need to react to the world's chaos. You have learned to observe it, to understand its rhythms, and to choose your entry points with deliberate precision. Or more often, to choose not to enter at all. This is not detachment from life, but a deeper, more discerning engagement with it. You begin to see the machinery of human interaction with a new clarity. You notice how much of daily conversation is not about connection, but about seeking validation, asserting dominance, or deflecting insecurity. You watch people in line for coffee, in business meetings, in their relationships, trying to bait each other into emotional transactions, and you understand it now as a form of currency, and you have simply chosen to be wealthy in a different way. Your wealth is your peace. When you stay calm, you rob manipulative people of their leverage. You no longer need to prove a point, defend your name, or explain your worth. You have already lived through the ultimate lesson that taught you everything the moment you stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You gain back your sovereignty. This internal revolution changes the very nature of your presence. You walk differently. You speak less, but your words carry more weight because they are no longer diluted by a desperate need to be heard. You love differently. You are no longer drawn to the intoxicating, chaotic energy of a woman who mistakes drama for passion. That particular addiction has been cured. Instead, you find yourself drawn to a different quality altogether: stillness. You can sit in someone's silence now and feel at home, not threatened. You understand that real intimacy isn't forged in the fire of arguments and reconciliations, but in the quiet shared space where nothing needs to be proven. You now value those who understand peace, because you have survived the kind who needed constant reaction for her. Your silence has become a lifelong inheritance, a legacy she never wanted but cannot renounce. It is no longer about romance or rekindling a lost love. That ship has sailed, and she watches its wake fade on a horizon she can no longer reach. What remains is something far more enduring: respect. It is a cold, clear, and humbling respect for the man who mastered what she could only manipulate: self-control. She'll try to convince herself she's moved on, that the pain has faded, but deep down she knows the truth. Your silence is eternal, because silence doesn't fade. It lingers. It lives in the spaces between what was said and what never needed to be. Every time she sees your name, hears a fragment of your story, or crosses paths with something that reminds her of you, it reinforces this quiet understanding. You didn't abandon her. You outgrew her. You didn't withdraw your love. You redirected it inward, and in doing so, you became a man whose worth was self-evident, no longer requiring her certification. You begin to look back not with regret, but with a profound sense of gratitude. Every unanswered text, every argument you walked away from, every night you chose sleep over proving a point, they were not losses. They were reps in a grueling workout that built your emotional resilience. You thank her, not with words, but with the life you've quietly built since she left. The very silence that once felt like a loss has become your most fertile ground. You use it to build your purpose, your focus, your strength. You don't need to announce your growth because it is visible in your unwavering presence. That is the final stage of mastery, not proving you've changed, but embodying the change so completely that those who once doubted can feel it in your energy. Your silence has transformed into wisdom. And wisdom doesn't speak, it radiates. It is a calm that is deeply masculine, the energy of a man who can face chaos without needing to control it. This strength is magnetic. The same woman who once dismissed your calm now admires it from an unbridgeable distance. The same people who once misunderstood your silence now crave a fraction of your composure. You didn't win her back. You didn't even need to. You won something far greater, yourself. And once a man wins that, the world bends quietly in his favor. You stand in a different kind of power now, one that doesn't need applause, recognition, or validation. The kind of power that simply is. And the woman who once mistook your heart for weakness is left with the lifelong echo of your peace, a constant, quiet reminder of the man she lost. Not to another, but to his own unassailable evolution.